taping. Okay. Boker Tov. So just as in a historical note, we know that this morning, Baruch Hashem, Jonathan Pollard and his wife, what's her name, Esther? I think, yeah. Yeah, they landed. They're here. They're home in Israel. Whatever your politics are, yeah, they landed this morning.
Good morning.
Wow.
Yeah. In the middle
Was
of the
that a secret? I had no idea.
I think it was kept hush hush. And my understanding is they came on a private jet from Sheldon Adelson's private jet.
Oh my God!
Yeah,
I'm
greeted by Bibi and others, right?
Wow.
So that's pretty cool. And in more important news, I got my chisun. So my wife and I got it. So but we didn't kiss the ground at Meucheret. That we didn't do.
Pollard kissed the ground.
Of course you did. So can't begin to imagine what he's feeling. So okay. Anyways, we are going to be looking at some not long, but some pages from Rav Aviner's book in a minute, just kind of reminding everybody, and everything we do today and likely next week is still just the introduction to the whole thing of the Sefer Yetzirah. In order to really get proper understanding when we learn Sefer Yetzirah, the pieces from it, and again, it's quite complicated. We can't just jump into it, which is why Rav Yehuda Levi gives this whole background, and Rav Aviner helps us understand this background. So let's just go to the screen share, and I'll be quiet and just go straight to the PowerPoint. Okay, I'm gonna change it to this. Very good. Move you all over. Just a little more out of the way. Okay, fine. I'm going to pick up where you see that arrow. We had said last week that the difference between Hashem and human beings, besides the obvious many, many differences, is the issue of how Hashem doesn't have a process when it comes to creation. There's no thought, action, result. It's all the same thing. So right now we're going to take a look at, oh, sorry, didn't mean to do that. Okay, it's as follows. It says, Remember, we said just last before this, that when it comes to Hashem, it is not a step of processes. Hu omer ve'oseh gozer mukayem, as we mentioned last week. Also, Hashem is omer ve'oseh, which is the same action. Hashem says, it happens. It comes to an existence, and I suggested that you think about this a little bit when it comes to when you say, Oh Shema. When he speaks, it comes into existence. Hashemati v'na'aseh ritzoni. Ritzono sheli b'olam hu ritzon po'al, ritzon yotzer. Hashem's speech, or Hashem's ratzon rather, is an active ratzon, which means his ratzon acts, it creates. When it comes to humans' desire, it lacks any kind of meaning of action. As I say, book, I say I want a table here. Okay, it doesn't cause any action. He gives the example. I want a piece of bread. Just because I say I want a piece of bread, better yet, I would say I want a donut. It's not just automatically in my hand. Now, kind of buckle up, because it's going to be very hard to accept series of paragraphs, but I want you to keep an open mind. He says, this statement is not absolute, that our speech does not create. The more a person has a connection to God, so too he is able to reveal the godly or the divine power with his own speech. We're talking about the human now. To such an extent that a person could speak and create not something out of nothing, but to create with his speech similar to God. Well, again, I say that's a little bit of a kitzoni statement. It's also something we're not very used to. But let's see what he gives us examples and some background. Yoshua kara, shemesh b'givon dom. the sun should stand still. He was in the middle of a battle. He needed more daylight, and he commanded the sun to stand still. And the sun stood its ground. It didn't go anywhere. Let me go back to here something. Okay, next slide. Oh, I didn't have to do that. You should know I should get used to this better. Sorry. Go back here. There. Adam mitzaveh, person, the human being, commands. I just lost the place. Al marachot shamayim v'zeh poel. A human being, in this case it was Yoshua, commands the system, the heavenly system, and it acts. This is not because Yoshua has some special human power, but rather because of the divine power that he had in him. Somehow there was some divine power that was within him that allowed his statement of Shemesh b'givon dom to cause the sun to stand still. He clinged to, loved Hashem. This kesher was very strong. I keep touching the screen because it keeps moving to the next slide. Sorry about that. I forgot that I can't use my my mouse when it's in this mode. Okay, so you'll just follow along then. It's so strong that the divine will or strength works through it, meaning it's not that Yehoshua had some special power, but rather he got to such a level of divine connection that when he said something such as Shemesh b'givon dom, let the sun stand still in Givon, that Hashem's power came through his speech and made the sun stand still. Sometimes a stam person is able to cause action with his speech. V'zohi hatfilah shel kulanu. This is our prayer. Davening isn't just we want to give praise to Hashem. No, it doesn't cause physical changes when we say something. What happens when we daven? When we say when we say slach lanu avinu, when we say refa'enu Hashem, what happens as a result? As a result of the tefillah, there are changes in nature. The greater a person is, his power as tefillah is stronger. And he's able to act on what exists with more strength. Okay, I'll give you one example. Whether you have or you yourselves have done this or not, you know that people go to tzaddikim for bracha, right? When you say, please daven for so-and-so because they're sick, or they need a shidduch, or they need parnasa, you ask someone to daven on your behalf. What are they doing? They're not going out and finding them a job. They're not the doctor that's giving them the chisun. They're not the et cetera, et cetera. What are they doing? They're using their voice. They're using their speech. But he's pointing out, and we don't even necessarily realize this, that it is our speech that causes these changes. Not because our speech did anything directly, but it's the koach eloki. It's our connection to Hashem. Continuing, this idea is found in the Gemara Sanhedrin.
Can I make a point? Just one quick point that I think it's interesting to say that a nice kal v'chomer is that, how many times have we heard when we don't say something when we might, or where we don't look at something that we don't, that we move a lot and we make changes. So kal v'chomer, that certainly things that we say can also have effects on the shamayim and in the shamayim and for us as individuals.
Excellent. I'll add to what you said. It's very good. It says that you're not allowed to see the object of your friend that's gone lost, v'hita lamta, and kind of pretend you don't see it. You have to take action. So in a metaphorical or a mashal kind of statement, it tells us that when you see your brother who's lost, v'hita lamta, and you just kind of don't pay any attention, and you don't do anything, that's on us also. So you're right that our lack of speech does something, kal v'chomer, our actual speech does. Very good catch. Excellent. So right by this parentheses, that's about the 8 lines down. So the Gemara Sanhedrin says samachet bet, okay? It tells us a series of stories in Gemara and Sanhedrin that the Amoraim, who were the rabbis of the time period of the Gemara, that every Erev Shabbat, they dealt with the halachot of Yitzirah, of creation. Vaya nivra lahem egel mishulash. They would create, so to speak, a calf, and we'd eat it. Obviously, they didn't create this egel, this calf, in order to eat it. They really wanted to investigate and understand what is this divine power that gives life to the egel, and how does it work? Hashem wants, for whatever reason, that egel to exist. If he didn't want it, there wouldn't be an egel. Now, he's going to continue going. I don't want to interrupt, so to speak, too much here by my speaking. I'm just going to continue going through this. And when we get to the end, it's kind of a long piece. We get not even to the end, but halfway through, I'll add on some ideas here. But let's just see where he's going with this, because right now it seems kind of Twilight Zone-esque. Let's see. The beginning of the next line says, Bikshu. Bikshu ha'chachamim havin et ha'ma'abar me'aratzon eloki le'metziut havayat ha'egel. They wanted to understand this transition from the godly desire to this current existence of this egel. V'chol od eincha chava et hadavar begufcha v'eincha oseh zot be'atzmacha. And the whole while, all the while that you did not experience this yourself and didn't do it yourself, lo tuchal redet lo makavana bazeh. Meaning, if they didn't somehow with their speech create or bring into existence, I don't want to say create, even though that's the word that's used, bring into existence this egel, they would not be able to truly start to comprehend what it means, this godly ability to bring something into existence. Al-Kain, therefore, they felt that there was a spiritual, mandated, holy act in bringing this egel into existence. V'chein, so too, Nizkar b'Gemara sherava bara gavra. Rava created a person, bara golem. He built what we call a golem. Now, in modern Hebrew, golmi just means raw, like raw material. The chomer gelem is raw material. But he created a golem. Why? L'lamedcha she'ibau tzadike bar alma. That if a tzaddik wanted it, and we're not talking about the tzaddikim of today, even though they're great tzaddikim, we're talking the time of the Amoraim, the time of the Gemara, which we can't even begin to fathom the greatness and their abilities to connect to God. That if the tzaddik wanted it, he would be able to create a world. Umadua en hadavar mitkayem. So why doesn't it last? What is, we've talked about this multiple times in Kuzari, that our averot separate us from Hashem, means cause this distance, this divine distance. If these tzaddikim lived with complete and total tshuva, and there was absolutely nothing separating them, between them and God, they would be able, with their own speech, to create a world. What prevents us, you and me, from doing this? Why can't I just say, you know what? I want steak. Yehi steak. Yehi steak, vayhi steak. Why not? Because we have built up a massive wall through avonot, through sin, between us and Hashem, and therefore our koach eloki that would flow through us is unable to do this. Rava created a person. And he sent it to Rabbi Zera. Rabbi Zera spoke to the golem, and it didn't respond. Amarlo, he said to him, Man chavreat, whose friend are you? He understood that this was a golem and not a human. He wasn't human because he didn't have the power of speech. Because what separates man from everything else is our power of speech. How speech is that which connects us to other people. What does speech do? It removes misunderstandings, potentially. יוצר קשרי ידידות ובונה את החברה האנושית. Rabbi Zeir החזיר לאפרו, he returned this golem to its original state of dust. מן הקשר שם מבואר כי בריאת הגולם כמו העגל הייתה על פי ספר היצירה. It becomes clear that the way that the golem was created, the way that the egel mishulash was created, was by use of the Sefer Yetzirah. This is part of the reason Rav Aviner is mentioning all these situations in Gemara. Mashma sham she'en kol chidush o koshi b'briyat golem al pi Sefer Yetzirah. Meaning, when I started off saying, well, this is a little bit fantastical, this is like, come on, give me a break. Okay, in normal life, it is give me a break. But we're talking about these gedolim, these tzaddikim that we can't even begin to fathom the depth of the tzidkut, who made use of the Sefer Yetzirah, which we still haven't really done more than dip our toe in so far. And the only way it could really be used is by somebody who his avonot, his sin, does not cause a barrier between him and God. The reason that he makes that statement is you can go online or you can go to the bookstore and buy Sefer Yetzirah. So you might be tempted to say, oh, you know what? I want to build a pergola. So I'm just going to get the Sefer Yetzirah and boom, yeah, pergola. It doesn't work that way. As an aside, he tells us a fascinating halacha that's mentioned in Mishnah Berurah. I'm not going to read this next paragraph. I'm just going to tell you about it. The question is, and I talked about this in one of my classes not that many months ago, was what would happen if you had 9 people, 9 adult males, and a golem? Could you include the golem as the minion? He's been created, right? It was an actual shaila that was asked, and it's mentioned in the name of the Chacham Tzvi that's asur to include that person as a minion. Ad Kedei Kach, the Mishnah brings this case. Why would he bring something like that? Unless it's telling us something additional, which is that such a thing is possible. It is. Not necessarily in our days, but a person who was at a certain level, who had the ability to use the Sefer Yetzirah, would have been able to do it potentially. Okay, stop screen share for a moment now. Okay, and we're going to look in the text. Okay, so first is a couple points. One of the things we're trying to get across, not we, that the Kuzari, Rav Aviner is trying to get across is what we're starting to down this path into Sefer Yetzirah is it's not just a Kabbalistic work. It's not just something that's a little bit hard to understand, but it has actually some power to it when in the right hands. And how can we understand what that means when it's in the right hands? Assume for a moment, I assume none of you is a surgeon. Am I right? No one here is a surgeon, right? By the way, the proper English is none of you is, not none of you are, because none is no one. One is singular. None of you is a surgeon. So let's assume for a moment you go into an operating room. You're all gowned and gloved and masked and like you're going to go to the makolet, but no, you go into the operating room and you are given absolutely the best technology on earth to operate on someone who's lying on the operating table. You wouldn't be able to do it. You might be able to do a little bit, maybe figure out how to cut, but what exactly? So you have all the tools, you just don't know how to use them. So we have the tool, the Sefer Yetzirah. Just like I say, go online, download it. But having the tool, but not being able to use it is the biggest problem. It doesn't put it together. So one of the things he wants us to understand here, the Kuzari, is that before we start getting into it, and you may be tempted to say, oh, wow, that we have this power to do, it doesn't work that way. It just doesn't work that way. Okay, let's take a look, please, at the next paragraph. Let me tell you what page you're probably on. I have no idea. Maybe someone said about 445 or something like that. It's going to start with the words Ach haleshonot v'hamichtavim.
Page 454.
454. I said 445, 454. I'm a little dyslexic. Okay, 454. Right? That's just that. Okay, 454, where it says Ach haleshonot v'hamichtavim. He's going to talk now about writing, about letters. Remember, words, as obvious as it is, words are made up of letters. Speech is made up of words. So if we're already talking about the power of speech, we also have to talk about the power of and the value of letters and words, the written word I'm talking about now. It's amazing stuff he's going to tell us. And we'd also have a chance to look at, I came across what looks like, well, you'll see. Forget it. I'll tell you when we get to it. Okay. When it comes to language and written language, both in other words, speech, actual words that you say, and the written word, there are some who have an advantage over others. Some cases, the word matches up very nicely to the item that's called by that name. And others that the word and the object don't really have any kind of connection whatsoever. The godly language, i.e. Hebrew, that God taught Adam, and he placed it in his mouth, or his tongue, and in his heart. I'll explain what that means in a minute. That the words in Hebrew are absolutely, Hebrew is the most perfect language. Doesn't mean there aren't irregular verbs. That's not what he's talking about. But Hebrew is the most perfect language and also the most mat'im for the words and the objects they describe. We're going to get to examples in a minute. But first, before we even continue the rest of the sentence of Kamo Shamar, what does it mean that Hashem placed the Hebrew language in Adam's mouth and in his heart? Just say he placed it in his mouth. Now, no, this isn't Tanakh where you medayek every single word, but he's saying this very specifically. What do you think he means? He placed the language, the Hebrew language, both in his tongue and in his heart. Anyone want to take a guess? Okay, so I'll tell you the answer. The heart represents thought. Like, you can say to somebody, I like you, and inside think you can't stand the guy's guts. But in your heart, it becomes more internal. So the mouth and the words are external. They represent the external, what you say. It's called min hapeh v'chutz. And the heart is inside. Why? We're going to see why that makes a difference. Kamo she'amar, right now we're going to see. B'chol asher yikra lo ha'adam nefesh chaya hu shemo. It says in the Torah, what seems to be a very simple statement, that whatever Adam called the various animals or living creatures, that was their name. Okay, what's the big deal? Okay, I call instead of I call it a cat, I called it a twitch. Okay, so what? Who cares? The name stuck. Big deal. No, we know Rashi tells us in other places that Adam was able to look into the, so to speak, neshama, the essence is probably a better word, of every living thing, using the Hebrew language, used the word to connect to that animal, that living thing, and called it by that. This is why it says that Hashem put this language not just on his tongue that he can make up words and call animals what he wanted to, but he could actually see with it through his intellect. Hashem gave him that what the essence of the animal was, and then called the animal by that name.
I have an example, by the way. Rabbi,
I'm sorry?
I just in case people want an example, well, how could he do that? I heard a kelev was kelev.
Kelev, right? That's correct.
Kelev, it's a very, very heartwarming animal. They
Correct.
say that a dog is man's best friend. Well, there's something to that, and
Yes,
with the name kelev, that's the way
Right.
Adam named it.
that's correct. There are many examples. That's a great example. There's many, but there's one thing that's really, it's a big disparity. They said that a dog is a man's best friend and diamonds are a woman's best friend. There's some disparity there. I'm sorry. Something's really wrong there. Anyways, so that the name was connected to the object itself. By the way, Rav Aviner, when you get to the next slide, we'll see both in terms of language and in terms of even chemical composition, we're going to talk about in some cases. We'll see what he's talking about a little bit more in depth. So, and one of the other reasons to give Hebrew an advantage, the malachim understand it even more and sense it more from other languages. Gemara tells us in a few places that the malachim actually don't understand Aramaic. I had a lot of students that don't either, but that's a different story. Kitzurot otiotav enam belo chavana uv'mikre. Not only are the words in Hebrew matimot, appropriate and fit the object it is called, and what about modern Hebrew? He's going to get to that in Rav Aviner's thing. But the letters themselves also, their shapes also are meaningful and not just happenstance. Every letter, every shape of a letter, every name of a letter has a very specific meaning. Now I'm going to talk about that for a minute. We're going to see as we get into Rav Aviner's piece a little bit more on that. That a couple of things I'm going to say now, he actually will tell us, but I want to say it verbally first. Some of you may know, these are messed up. Some of you may know that the Hebrew letters we have today are not the Hebrew letters that they had in the time when the Torah was given. It evolved to the point where Ezra HaSofer more or less gave us the alphabet we have today. There's a guy who I know who is an archaeologist. And for those of you in the Kuzari, in the Navi class, I said I was going to mention about, I'm going to invite someone to speak to us, hopefully in a few weeks, about Chizkiyahu's broad wall. He's an archaeologist, he's an amazing scholar, he's everything, and a tremendous Talmud Chacham. So I asked him, someone asked me the question about the whole history of the Hebrew language, the letters, and the way it changed, and did the letters today have the same kedusha as they did in the ancient times? So he directed me to a sefer. He said there's a small ma'amar, like an essay on the topic. It's about 150 pages long. That's a small essay. So I am not in any way, shape, or form prepared to give any background on that at all. Just to say the historical fact that pretty much from the time of Ezra till today is the Hebrew letters that we see. If you looked at any ancient script, any ancient writing, you will see that the letters, you wouldn't see it necessarily, but how it was back then, would be in some cases radically different and some a little bit different than what we have today. But in either case, they have the same level of kedusha, they have the same level of meaning behind the words of what the letters are called. There is a Gemara in Shabbat, on Kuf Daled, that discusses the alphabet, the shapes of the letters, the order of the letters. We're going to take a look at that in a few minutes on a slide. It's not even a slide, it's a website that came across that will help us understand that what we see as something, I don't know, is the right word, pedestrian, maybe, like ABCs, alphabet, gamma, whatever, in the Cyrillic alphabet, which I told you I know I can read and write. The letters, they have names, they have shapes. Aleph bet, there's an aleph, there's a bet. Okay, what's the difference between aleph bet and gimel and alphabet a gamma or an ABC? They all kind of sound the same, right? But we're going to see that when it comes to Hebrew, it's a magnificent difference. Okay, so let's go to the next slide. I'm going to take it off of this. How do I? Okay, there. Whoops. Hold on. Sorry. Where did I leave off here? This one here. Okay. Move you all over. Mikan lavanat mahut halashonot. From here we move now onto the understanding of the essence of language. Hasafot. Lichora en evdel ben hamila shulchan lemila table. There's no difference really between the word shulchan and the word table. Shtehen pitaron leba'aya semantit bilvad. Ketzad labiya mashu. Both of them resolve a semantic problem. How do we express something? Ketzad lechanot et harahit. How do we call this particular piece of furniture Baal arba raglaim, that has 4 legs, hameshamesh lelimud, and can be used for learning? Achzot taut. To think that the word table and shulchan are the same, mean the same thing and have the same value, it's a mistake. Yeshna ma'ala lisafa havrit. Hebrew has a much higher level of importance of, let's use the word importance for now. We already talked about this in the first essay of the Kuzari about 2-3 years ago, whatever it was. Way back when he was talking to, this is very early on, he was talking to the king about the essence of language and the importance of language. השפה אינה עניין הסכמי, או עניין להחלטת האקדמיה, שחפץ זה ייקרא כך וכך. Hebrew language, again, we're going to talk about modern Hebrew in a moment, is not just a bunch of people got together or some academy got together and said, okay, we're going to call this thing a shulchan, or we're going to call this thing a table. Zot ta'ut inyanit, praktit, v'gam historit. It's both a practical and historical mistake. Yadua, it is known. Shepamim mamtzia academia milim bodedot. Sometimes a language academy will in fact come up with individual words. Shechelkan nekletu v'chelkan nidchu ha'idei hamon. Some words are accepted or used, and others are pushed aside. They're not used. I'll give you one example. When I was growing up, there was a word for television. It wasn't televisia. Anyone want to guess what it was? Anyone remember who learned it as a kid?
Was it the boob tube?
No, in Hebrew.
Something to do with Reka or something?
No.
No.
The word was sikayon. It's never used. No one ever says it. It's never in print anywhere. Machteva. Machteva was a desk. That's what we all were taught as kids. It's not used. Everyone calls it a shulchan or a shulchan avodah. No one calls it a machteva. There are plenty of words like this, but some are never, ever used, and some are actually pushed aside. When we finish this section, I forget to tell you about Academia Lashon HaIvrit. Please remind me. It's a fantastic site. V'chein yidua, HaTorah, whatever, onomatopoetic language. We know what onomatopoeia is. But onomatopoeia is something as a word that the name of the word or the word itself is based on a sound of the object. And they give an example. He says, by the way, that this is not going to be true. Lemashal bakbuk. Where does the word bakbuk, which means bottle, come from? It comes from the sound that the liquid that's being poured out of a bottle makes. Bakbuk, 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 bakbuk. Was born the word bakbuk. Aval, this is not a complete explanation. The shita acheret, another approach. It comes from also in some people's opinion, words are fashioned by the feeling that is exuded or brought out by a specific word. For example, the word magi'il. Magi'il means if someone says, ugh, magi'il is disgusting. It gives this feeling of disgust, of pushing away. There's a better word I can't think of, relative to this object or to this food that a person may not want to eat. Shita, sorry. Omnam anu omrim shemi sheyotzer et hasafa einam professorim be'akademia. We believe, we say, that the language is not something created by professors in an academy. V'lo shum shita muskemet ela hamon levado. Haslang shel hayom zo hasafa shel machar. Today's slang can be part of tomorrow's language. I'll give you an example. Before Corona, before Corona, people may have known the word bidud, kapsula, but it's become such an integral part of our daily speech that what might have been, like a slang kind of thing, where they sat in capsules and they learned, which I don't think anybody ever said. Now it's become part of regular speech. The only kind of shmor merchak we would think of is like you should keep your distance from the truck or the car in front of you. The masses speak in just very simple terms. People are not necessarily careful to be medakdek and specific in the way they speak. And also some words come out just naturally by various experiences in life. Every country, every nation develops its own language based on the spirit of that particular country. And the intellectuals go ahead and take the words and they make them more precise, let's say. They make them nice. When we take a look at a language of a people, it also, in hindsight, helps us to understand the psychology of a nation. I'll give you one example. The word in Hebrew for ice is kerach. You have one word, ice. In Inuit, I-N-U-I-T, I think it's pronounced, which is the Eskimos, they have dozens of words for snow and ice because they have different types of snow and different ice. So what tells us automatically that in their culture, there's something special or important about snow and ice. Okay. So he continues here. Emoli masfatecha. Tell me what your language is. And I will tell you the nature of your nation that you come from. Lemashal, for example, b'chol ha'umot ha'isha pchuta umzulzelet b'nei ha'ish b'hachevra. The Islam, b'chem ha'ma'arav. In many nations, the woman is second. It says like second class. In Islam and in the West, ha'isha nitba'a lehitlabesh yafa. Yes, Avram, you raised your hand on purpose or by accident?
Eddie Silverstein is trying to reach you.
Okay.
She can't seem to get in.
I don't know why. It's the same link. I don't know. If you are in touch with her, just tell her I'll send her the tape when we're finished. Bezrat Hashem. Tape. Okay, forget this part here. I don't want to get into what he says here now. Lochen etzleinu. All this concept of the language as it develops and takes on the nature of the people, and then he says that's not the way it is when it comes to Ivrit. Hishva hakatuv. Bara kadosh baruch hu et haminim b'shivyon muchlat benehem. For example, God created, unlike how there's a distinction between men and women in many cultures, Hashem created humans, meaning men and women, with absolute parity. Zachar unkeva bira'am. Hashem created male and female. He created them. Vaikra et shemam Adam. He called their name man. Doesn't mean man, it's human. Alkein zoi milachat balat shte mashmoyot. The word Adam does not mean men. It means humans, men and women. Just like the languages are different from nation to nation, kachem gam haktavim. Also the writing. Words, the written word, reveals the nature, the essence of a nation. The Hebrew letters reveal the depth of reality. Hashem created the letters. And everything else came as a result of every other nation's growth of their language. The world was created with Lashon HaKodesh. Okay.
Hi. Yeah,
Hi.
I've been trying to get in since 10:30, and I just tried through Samsung instead of Zoom, and it came in.
That's so weird.
I don't know
I'm sorry.
I'll
send you the tape anyways, okay, so you'll see the whole thing.
What?
I'll send you that when we're done. Also, I'll send you the recording.
Yeah. Okay.
Okay, very good. I'm glad you're here.
Yeah.
Okay. Umikan lashon nofel al lashon. Hakayam b'safa ivrit bilvad. Come on. Adam nivra me adama. The word Adam, if you never realized it, comes from this, has the same root, or is the same as Adama, because Adam is created from the Adama. You don't have this in other languages. Chava, as the Torah tells us, em kol chai. Isha, ki me'ish lukachazot. She's called Isha, woman's called Isha, because she is from the man, meaning she was created from part of man. V'chein hala and so on. Lashon HaKodesh megale et atzmayut havaya. Im eda b'diuk b'tzura mushlemet, mahen otiyot shulchan, b'tzeirufehen al pi seder hazeh, eda mahu shulchan. If I know exactly the shape and understand every letter of Shin, Lamed, Chet, Nun, and all the meanings behind them, I would actually understand what exactly a Shulchan is. What is he telling us? That in theory, if I've never seen a Shulchan, but I'm someone who has the depth and understanding of every one of those letters and what they mean when they're combined, then I would be able to picture in my head a table. Kashem, he gives us an interesting example. If you said to a great chemist, NaCl, which we know is sodium chloride, which is salt. Vivakshu, even I know that, and I didn't do well in chemistry. Vivakshu letzayin tchunot hamelach, and you asked him, based just on this, Na and Cl, tell me the tchunot, tell me the characteristics of salt. He'd be able to tell you, or she, exactly the combination of NaCl, this, whatever the amount of atoms, molecules, whatever it is, together. We'll be able to be very specific, be able to tell you extreme detail about it, because they understand what the Na is, they understand what the Cl is, and what the combination is. So too, he says, if you are to truly understand the Aleph, the Bet, or in this case, the Shin, the Lamed, the Chet, and the Nun, the meaning behind each letter, and the tzeruf of these letters, the combination of these letters together, you would know without even having to see what a table was, what a table was. Okay, now, show you something kind of cool. At least I think it's cool. Don't get overwhelmed by the screen, because it's actually, I'm not going through the whole thing, it's all this. Don't worry, not doing all of that. I mentioned to you that there's a Gemara in Shabbat that talks about the letters of the Aleph Bet. It talks about their shape, talks about the order. I'm going to go through a little bit of it because I like this visual. The reason that he has this set up like that is that there are 1, 2, 3, 4, or 5 different ways you can look at the Aleph Bet. I'm looking right now just at the basic, simplest way. It says in the Gemara like this, that sometimes the Aleph and the Bet, or sometimes a letter represents a word or a meaning, and then the position next to another letter or the shape of it also has meaning. Again, don't have to remember all this stuff. Just I want to give you a taste of this. The Gemara says like this: Aleph Bet means Aleph Bina. Okay, then you have Gimel Dalit, Gomel Dalim. What does it mean, Gomel or Gomul Dalim, Gomel Dalim? It means that a person does acts of chesed to the poor. Haregal shel Gimel, the Chivun Dalit. The leg of the Gimel faces in the direction of the Dalit. Why? Shekach tzarich ligmol chasadin larutz acharei hadal. Because the Gimel, the Gomel, the one who wants to do chesed, should be running after the Dalit, meaning the Dalit, the poor person. But Gamaregel shel Dalit noteh yemina legimel. The Dalit is written not like this, but like this, meaning that the back part or the leg of the Dalit is closer to the Gimel. Why? Shegam hadal yamtzi et atzmo. He shouldn't make himself hard to find. Achugam agav legimel. But the back of the Dalit is to the Gimel. Why? That when the Gimel, the Gomel, gives something to the Dal, to the poor person, represented by the Dalit, it should be done beseter, so that the person is done privately. The imata Gomel Dalim, if you do give du chesed to the poor, as then, hey vav zayin chet tet yud kaf. What does that mean? Hey vav stands for Hashem. Zanotcha, he will sustain you. Chenotcha will give us, shine his countenance upon you. Oops. No. Hold on, sorry. Where was I? Metiv lecha will give you benefit. V'noten lecha yerusha. V'kosher lecha keter leolam haba, and crown you with a crown of the eternal world. Okay, now I'm not going to go the rest of it right now, but if you're interested, you can find a number of places online where you can go into Masechet Shabbat Daf Kuf Daled, that's page 104, and you'll see a lot of background. If you're interested in this site, I can just let me know and I'll forward you the link. This is at the absolute simplest level, because if you never noticed, the whole Aleph Bet is made up of other letters. And Aleph is made up of basically a Vav and 2 Yuds, the way it's written. Vav on the angle, the Yud's one on top and one on the side. A Chet is a Dalet and a Vav. Sorry, the way it's written for a Torah is 2 Zions. It's 2 Zions with a connection on top. So there's tremendous depth, both in terms of the letters themselves and their meaning. The tzirufam, the combination of these letters, does something. I imagine that you've heard this before. There's also another Gemara that you know that the word abracadabra that's used in magic comes from 2 Aramaic words, ada kedavra. It will be as I say. The thing will be as I say. Is the concept of our speech brings about something. Dibur is speech. Davar is a thing. That our dibur brings about things. the only other comment I want to make has to do with shemot, with names. We said that a table is called a table in English doesn't necessarily mean. Hold on, you know what? I'm gonna take off my video for a second. I have to run over to plug my computer. It's about to die, so you don't see. Some people get nauseous or dizzy watching someone walk around the computer. So I'm very sensitive to that. I have a daughter that causes her to get dizzy if I do that. So we say that the word table in English or in French or whatever it might be is the name of the object. Somehow, however, it developed. In Hebrew, again, the shin lamed chet nun, the tziruf haotiyot, the meaning behind the letters is matim, is appropriate for that. The only other comment I'll make when it comes to shemot is about actual names. In multiple places, we are told that when parents name their child, that they get a little level of a ruach hakodesh, of like a little spiritual high that helps them name the child, and that somehow that name is matim, is appropriate for the essence of who that child is. You think about it, and I don't want to hear any comments because it could be positive or negative. You think about someone, whether it's your own name or other names you've heard of other people, and think about their, not on the, who they are in general, but really what's their essence, who they really are. And you think about their Hebrew name. It's like, wow, that name really does fit. Now, is it like that all the time? No. But bigadol, I can tell you of situations where people decided on a name. A husband and wife decided on a name. They got to the bris, for example, and literally the last minute, they changed their mind and changed the name at the last second. Where did that come from? Was it because someone passed away 2 minutes ago? That does happen. That has happened. But it does happen where people change their mind because they all of a sudden they got this inspiration from somewhere. I will tell you anecdotally that I've had the opportunity over the last 20 years to be involved in people who were trying to decide on what name to choose for their child. And I would sometimes say, okay, besides maybe naming for somebody, where did this name come to you? How did you say? I don't know. It kind of just popped into my head. I never even thought of that name before. And I say that, look, there is some level of a higher level of spirituality the person gets when they're naming, or the parents are getting when they are naming their child. So this is true about Hebrew. It's true about the Hebrew language. It's true about the letters. There's a vast world out there when it comes to this. But this pretty much, we have just a little bit more, and then we pretty much finished the introduction. All this, whether it's remember the Sfaras Sefers and the Sviva, and Sipur, those three things, the concept of the Hebrew language, the letters of the Hebrew language, the meaning behind that, all this is just to start now, giving us this basis and foundation for understanding the beginning of Sefer Yetzirah. He'll start with next week at some point when we get to it next Wednesday. Bezrat Hashem. Have a wonderful day, everybody, and we'll talk.
Thanks.
You're very welcome, everybody.